These are the top 10 best comics I read in 2024. Hey, super friends, Jake here with the Brave and the Boys, and it is December of 2024, which means we made it another year. Now, this was a year full of blessings in my life, and I'm so glad I got to share so many of them with each and every one of you. So this video, I decided instead of doing separate videos by publisher, I just wanted to do one ultimate top 10 list of the best books that I read in 2024. So some of these books might have come out before 2024. A lot of them did come out this year, but these were the best books that I read that truly reminded me what I love. So if you want to know my list of the top 10 best comics of 2024, it's the stack right here. But if you want to know why these are my top 10 books, get a little glimpse of the art, see some cool B-roll, all the fun jazz we throw in, stick around. Let's dive in. Coming up first, we have Riddler, One Bad Day by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. Now, you guys know I loved this book. I talked about it in my top 10 Tom King book video, but this is one of the best reads of the year. So this is the harrowing story of what happens when the Riddler goes too far. So it starts out flipping between the present and the past. So you get to see the Riddler when he's a young schoolboy getting spanked by his headmaster father. And yes, it's as great as it sounds, being drawn by Mitch Gerads. But you also get to see what happens when the Riddler stops playing a game, because he's Batman's smartest villain. But the whole reason the Riddler gets caught is because the Riddler has to give you a little riddle that will catch him. So he's, but what if he stops doing that? What if he goes as far as he goes, crosses lines, and Batman has no choice but to do the unthinkable to stop him? Now, if that was enough, it would already be a top 10, but this is some of the best art I've ever seen. It's an incredible story. It's dark, and it's ingenious how they make the Riddler so terrifying. So this is one of the best books I read this year. You definitely got to check it out. So you can either buy it by itself. They did have a fancy DM cover for Batman Day, and there's also the full box set if you want to get all the bad days. Some of them good, some of them great, some of them I don't really like them that much. But yes, this was an awesome book and one that I am so stoked to have read this year. Coming up next, we have a book that I wanted so badly. I left the comfort of my little home with my cats and all my books, and I ventured into the outside world of Target because this was a Target exclusive. I could have bought a trade paperback, but I wanted the hardcover. This is Birds of Prey by Kelly Thompson. Now, I had the genuine pleasure of getting to interview Kelly Thompson this year. It was one of the highlights of my 2024, but this was one of the best books I did on my readathon of Kelly Thompson. Now, so many amazing books that she's done, such as Black Widow, which was canceled way too soon. But this Birds of Prey is ongoing. She's still writing, and it is so much fun. So this is a team led by Black Canary, and it is like the craziest Birds of Prey team you've ever seen. It's got Big Barda, Harley Quinn, and they have to go up against the Amazonian army, the island of Themyscira, to rescue Black Canary's sister. And you get to see this team that does not get along at first learn how to be a team and learn how to be sisters, and it is an awesome story. It's got great moments such as her iconic DeLuca effect moments. It's got great jokes. There's a little Watchmen Easter egg in here that's fantastic. And they talk about Pokemon, which, I'm a massive Pokemon fan. So Kelly Thompson, I will read her do 300 issues on Birds of Prey. Keep, switching out the cast of characters because I feel like there's so many awesome, badass female protagonists in the DC world that could, spend a little bit on the team. But I cannot wait for volume 2. I cannot wait for volume 3, 5, 100, 6,000. Give me 100 volumes of this and I'll read every one. Let's jump on to the next one. Next up was my wife's most anticipated read of the year, and one that I loved that we both got to read and do our second video, her first overview together, which I'll link here. But that is Something is Killing the Children, Deluxe Volume 2 by James Tynion and Werther Dell'Edera. And this continues the story of Erica Slaughter, the most badass female monster hunter in the world since Buffy. And it is, you guessed it, about something is killing the children. So this one, you get to spend a lot of time with this young girl whose family got killed by the monsters, and it's really dark, but you get to see her interactions with Erica, and Erica try to save this girl from being framed for the murder. So the monster is crazy. It can slowly take the form of other things, and it is really hard to kill. So this is an awesome story. I will read 100 issues of Tinian Something is Killing the Children, and I'll read them all with my wife, and it's so good to connect, because that's what's so cool about comics, guys, is this might have incredible art and incredible action and an incredible story, but the most incredible part was getting to enjoy it with my wife, because it's not just about the comics, it's this community we've cultivated online that we get to share and love these stories together. So I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to, if I hope I can get it before the end of the year. They just did a art book of this with a deluxe edition and a slipcase, so I definitely want that. So thank you so much for letting me overview this with my wife. Okay, guys, so I was so sure I was going to include Geiger on this list, and you know what? I'm breaking my rules. This is my end of the year list. Geiger and this, they're connected. They get an honorable mention. You know, Junkyard Joe's and Geiger. There's a little Geiger tease in Junkyard Joe. But guys, I have to say, if I could only pick one, Junkyard Joe is the best Ghost Machine book I read this year. So super cool. Ghost Machine reached out, and they reached out to us and said, hey, Jake and Jordan, in the email. We get so many requests of people saying, hey, the Brave and the Boys, will you review our comic? But this one, they were like, hey, Jake and Jordan, we love your content. Will you do an interview with Ghost Machine? So that was awesome. So a couple things. These deluxe editions are not standard oversized hardcover size. These are Rick Remender deluxe edition sizes. So they're huge. It's honestly might be the perfect size book in terms of length and dimensions of the book. But what is this world? So Geoff Johns created his own imprint called Ghost Machine, and in it, he took all of his best comic book writer and best artist friends, and they all got to create their own creator-centric work. So in Geiger, you have a post-apocalyptic, almost Fallout-esque world where there is a lone man guarding his family inside a shelter, and he has like Dr. Phosphorus powers, and he's got a cool little wolf dog, and he just puts the beat down. He's kind of a vigilante, and he protects children, and he's just such a cool character. But in it, he fights a old rusty robot named Junkyard Joe. So that was the little Junkyard Joe tease. Now, this is the next book done by Geoff Johns and Gary Frank. This tells the story of Junkyard Joe, a robot in the Vietnam War who maybe existed, maybe didn't exist, but a young man was saved by him, but couldn't really tell if he was real or not, so he wrote a comic strip that became famous. Think like the Peanuts or Calvin and Hobbes. And for his entire life, after, you know, being a veteran from the war, he wrote his little comedic strip of Junkyard Joe. Well, that man's wife died, and he retired from writing the comic strip, and he thought he was going to live his life alone. And then what happens when his creation knocks on the door and needs his help? So while Geiger is a story about fathers and their children, this is a story about soldiers and veterans. This is a story about art. There's an awesome moment where you see them flipping through different comic strips, and you get to see Gary Frank draw a Charles Schultz Peanut, and you get to see him draw a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, and it's so cool to see. But this is a story about the power of art, how it overcomes the pain that we felt, and what it means to be a hero, and you have to read it. I will buy every Ghost Machine Deluxe Edition, and Ghost Machine, if you see this, I would love to do another interview. I'm sorry that my last interview didn't kind of bombed, but it was a genuine treat and one of the highlights of my life. Now, you guys knew there were going to be some absolutes on this list, and this is a book that I was so excited for. It was one of the most excited, hyped books of the year for me. This is Geoff Johns and Gary Frank's Absolute Superman. So this is stuff that's never been collected bigger than a deluxe edition. We've never gotten a Geoff Johns omnibus. Now, I'm going to tell you guys first, this doesn't collect everything Geoff Johns has done on Action Comics with Superman. It doesn't include the stuff that wasn't done by Gary Frank, so sadly no Last Son of Krypton, or thankfully no Escape from Bizarro World. So this is going to include a story where Superman has to go into the future with the Legion of Superheroes, and everything we know is flipped on its head, and Superman's whole story has been misused and lied about. Then it's going to have the amazing Superman Brainiac storyline, which has been an animated movie and reinvented Brainiac from being the weirdo in the past with the ponytail to being the menacing green robot that we know today. And lastly, it's going to have Superman's Secret Origin, my take on the definitive origin of the Man of Steel. So this is going to have them in the perfect reading order. It's awesome to read. It's in the perfect absolute size. Gary Frank is an incredible artist, and it's all stories that remind you what makes Superman the most important character in all of fiction. Now, I did a top 10 Superman video that included some of these stories, but this didn't exist yet. This is awesome because it takes some of my favorite Superman stories and puts them all together in the absolute size, which you know I love. So let's move on to the next one. Coming up next, we have the book that I failed over and over again trying to collect, but I actually got to read it this year after collecting it. That is Absolute Justice. So for those of you that might remember, I did buy a copy of Absolute Justice. It came no slipcase, smelling like cigarettes and completely torn up. And that was a little heartbreaking. Then I rebought it and I realized I accidentally bought another amazing Absolute I fell in love with called Absolute Justice League World's Greatest Superheroes. But I finally got a copy, and then I didn't read it for a year, which is the craziest thing. And then the reprint got announced this year, and I read it, and oh my gosh, this might be the best Alex Ross Absolute of them all. So this story is written by Jim Krueger with art and pencils done by Doug Braithwaite, and then Alex Ross paints over them, and oh my god, it's incredible. So to set the stage in this storyline, all the villains are having a dream of an apocalyptic future that the Justice League is powerless to stop. So they decide to team up for the first time ever to save the world. But all might not be what it seems. There's incredible moments. Every piece of art is insane and balls to the walls. And I think it is one, if not the greatest absolutes of them all. You need to get this, and luckily you'll have better luck than me because it's currently in print. You can just buy this. You don't have to buy a used copy that gives you secondhand smoke disease, or you don't have to buy a copy and get the wrong one. It's available, and it should always be in print. It should be an evergreen absolute. Let's jump on to the next one. Up next, I have to give a huge shout out to one of the best comic book writer and artists in the world, Josh Greathouse. Josh Greathouse, I'm talking to you directly because I know you watch my videos. You bullied me into buying this and The Last Call. So these are the amazing IDW collections of Darwyn Cooke's magnum opus, Richard Stark's Parker. So I had never heard of Parker before, but I guess they were these incredible crime books that became all these countless crime movies, and Darwyn Cooke was always a massive fan of them. If you read one of his best books, which was Selena's Big Score, he literally has a character in there that acts just like Parker named Stark. So like you could tell he's always wanted to do this, and he got his chance. He got to redo the classic stories and invent some new ones where he does all the writing and the art, and it is incredible and it is timeless. These are sometimes in print, sometimes out of print. We might not have the first one, but the second one might be available. There's also a compendium, but I'm cheating. I'm not just saying the first one, the Martini edition. I'm also saying Last Call because I read them back to back. And what's cool is you can read them in any order. They're kind of like short stories that are super engaging about crime and the character Parker. And he is not an anti-hero. He's a straight up villain. So he goes way too far sometimes. Now, one of the most touching moments is that sadly Darwyn Cooke passed before finishing this, and Ed Brubaker, who was a dear friend but also someone who he had grown apart from, got to write one last story about Parker and the characters in this world, and it was sort of a love letter, a obituary to his friendship with Darwyn Cooke. Darwyn Cooke always knew that crime comics were going to be huge, and when he read Ed Brubaker's Sleeper, he was like, dude, this is awesome. Get rid of all the superhero stuff and you'll have something incredible. So I feel like these are also somewhat responsible for the entire library of crime books we have from Brubaker and Phillips post this. So this was awesome. This is you guys know how much I love New Frontier, and this is him doing probably the thing that meant most to him. So everyone needs to read it in any format they can get it in. Next up, we have the The Secret Six Omnibus by Gail Simone. This was a book I was so excited for because I loved the Villains United storyline in Infinite Crisis. And I didn't realize they were someday going to make a whole omnibus of these characters. So you have Catman, who's sort of like an intense Batman, and Deadshot. And it's just Ragman, but he doesn't really have powers. He's just addicted to surgery, and Vandal Savage's daughter. It's a wild cast of characters, and they are so amoral, and they are just incredible villains that are sometimes kind of being the lesser of two evils. So essentially, they went to Gail Simone and said, we want you to write a villain Suicide Squad-esque book. And she goes, okay, I'll take this character. Oh, you can't use them. I'll take this character. You can't use them. So this isn't C-list characters and D-list characters. These are bottom of the barrel characters. and they are so amoral and they are so villains, but they are going up against all the other villains. So there's the Villains United storyline, and then there's a couple arcs afterwards, and it is awesome. We're supposed to get a volume 2 that's going to be jam-packed full of extras, and I can't wait. And it was awesome because when I met Gail Simone this year, another highlight, she told me how excited she was and how much I was going to love Secret Six. Gail, if you ever see this, you were right. I loved it. Let's jump on to the next one. Okay, guys. We're on to number 2, and I have a confession to make. There was a question that kept popping up from my awesome viewers, and they kept asking, should I get the Hush Omnibus or should I get the Paul Dini Omnibus? And I was like, you know what? I should just do a definitive video on this. You know, I even saw the thumbnail where I'm like holding both, and I'm like, get this, not that. You know, classic, awesome YouTube thumbnail. And I read the Paul Dini Omnibus, and I tore through it, binged the whole thing, and it was one of the best things I have ever read. And then I started reading the Hush Omnibus, and I couldn't even get through the Hush storyline, so which I've read 1,000 times and love. So right now I'm just saying it. I cannot stand the Hush Omnibus. This is significantly better, and just get this and get a copy of Hush somewhere else, and you have the best Hush storylines. But this is Paul Dini. Paul Dini wrote the best animated episodes of Batman, the animated series, the TV show that if it didn't exist, there probably wouldn't be a Brave and the Boys channel. So Paul Dini is the GOAT of writers. And in this one, he tells a lot of, it's cool because they're like one-off Batman storylines, almost like lost episodes of the animated series, but then they slowly interweave together, and you'll see characters that pop up in a one-off come back in bigger moments. It made me realize, like, how sick would Scarface be in the Matt Reeves Batman universe? You know, like, that's it makes such a compelling character. There's an awesome storyline. There's an awesome single issue where Robin is trapped in a car with the Joker and he has to break out. There's all these amazing one-offs. There's amazing moments with Zatanna, and oh my gosh, I kind of ship Bruce and Zatanna, but I also feel like Zatanna's too good for him. So you know what, Zatanna, don't date Bruce. But it is an awesome storyline and some of the best Batman that I've ever read, and you need to read it too. And finally, the best book I read in 2024. This is probably no surprise because I adored this book and I gave it all the love. I put it as my #1 omnibus for the new best omnibus for new readers. But seriously, Gotham Central, you have to read it. This was written by Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, and it tells the story of the Gotham Central PD, both the day shift and the night shift. So they got to split. One wrote the day shift, one wrote the night shift, and it focuses on the human characters. This tells the stories of the detectives who solve crimes in Gotham City, and it's awesome because when Batman does show up in this book, he's almost like a force of nature. There's awesome moments of them stopping serial killers and D-list villains. I mean, like, it makes you terrified of Batman's villains because why would Batman be scared of Mr. Freeze? But if you're just a regular cop, you're going to get your fingers frozen off. Or Firefly or those other characters. There's one awesome arc where kids keep getting murdered in the Robin costume, and the cops have to figure out, is this really Robin or is this not? So it's awesome. It's cool because Batman is almost like the antagonist. He's kind of working on his own against the detectives, so you get to see their relation, and it made me fall in love with the character of Renee Montoya even more. There's an amazing storyline between her and Two-Face that literally I was in tears reading it because of what that character goes through. And then later on, she becomes the Question, you know? So the only thing about this book is it ends a little abruptly, but that's because Infinite Crisis came wheeling in. But honestly, if you read this, it'll make you like Infinite Crisis and 52 even more. But this is the best book I read this year, and honestly, I could see myself reading this every single year. Guys, thank you so much for watching. This was a lot of fun to do. You guys are the best friends in the world, the best Brave Boys and Brave Girls in the world. Thank you all so much for supporting our channel. We want to do big things in 2025. We want to thank you all for supporting us. Keep reading and stay brave.